it's me, Mr. Cho, and today I'll be going through the 6093 10-year series topical book on the chapter on transport in humans. Alright, so let's get started. Okay, I think overall I'm happy that I think majority of you really put a lot of effort into your answers this time, and also I think a lot of you like revise your notes and use the notes properly. Okay, although there are some that still face difficulty in doing that. Anyway, let's get started. So the parts of the blood vessel, right, please be careful here, right? You do not want to lose any of these kind of marks, especially when it's basically it's 3 marks, right? I think some of us wrote actually pulmonary artery. Remember that the pulmonary artery carries blood away, right, from the heart towards the lung, and the pulmonary vein carries blood from the lung back towards the heart, right? So all veins carry blood towards the heart. Let's talk about the part labeled C. This is the semilunar valve, and you can call it the pulmonary valve also, and this prevents backflow of blood from the pulmonary arteries back to the right ventricle. So when you're talking about what does it prevent, right, remember to talk about from which blood vessel to which chamber, right? And also it ensures a one-way flow of blood. Describe and explain how blood entering the heart from the body organs reaches the lungs. Okay, so this one requires you to have both the description of the pathway and explaining why it's able to move from one place to the next place. Okay, so here we say deoxygenated blood, mistake here, is carried by the veins to the vena cava, where it enters the right atrium, and then the right atrium contracts, pressure increases, pushing blood past the tricuspid valve and into the right ventricle. The right ventricle will then contract, pressure will increase, and the blood is pushed past the semilunar valves, pulmonary, through the pulmonary arteries towards the lungs. Okay, so where are the marks? So assign the marks here. 1 mark here, 1 mark here, 1 mark here, and then I believe that should be 1 mark around here also. Okay, next move to the electron micrograph of a blood clot. Yeah, so sometimes when I see this, I'm reminded of that scene in Spider-Man, right, where he's like trying to use his spider webs to hold the train together. Okay, and then the A will be our fibrin. Okay, you don't have to write insoluble fibrin, just fibrin is fine, that's the name. Okay, and then B will be our red blood cells. Okay, so I think again these two structures you should not be getting it wrong. How is a blood clot formed? Okay, so when an injury is sustained, the injured tissue will activate the platelets. The platelets will secrete thrombokinase, which will then convert prothrombin to thrombin in the presence of calcium ions. The enzyme thrombin then converts soluble fibrinogen into insoluble fibrin. The fibrin threads form a mesh and traps the blood cells and form a blood clot. Okay, so that's the 3 marks there. So do memorize this story. It's quite a common question. Okay, sometimes blood clots can form inside a blood vessel and be carried in the blood to the brain. The arteries in the brain may become blocked by the clot. Suggest how this blockage may affect the brain. So the blockage in arteries in the brain reduces or stops the flow of blood through the arteries. Sorry, I think it's a bit weird to say this. To the maybe that's right, to the tissue, the brain tissue. Okay, so without blood, oxygen and glucose supplied to that region of the brain will be greatly reduced, as the cells in the region of the brain are not able to obtain sufficient oxygen or nutrients for aerobic respiration. Insufficient energy is released, and then the cells will die, and then this is known as a stroke. Okay, so it's actually quite similar to when we talk about coronary heart disease or heart attack, right? Basically, it's a very similar process. Without enough oxygen, without enough glucose, lowered aerobic respiration, not enough energy release, then the cells die. Okay, so this is actually known as brain death lah. Do you know that if you don't have enough oxygen in your brain, I think in about 4 minutes to 3 or 4 minutes, I think that's how fast it takes for your brain to die. Okay, so here a lot of us simply wrote muscle, or you wrote something like left ventricle. Please read the question carefully. The question actually asks you to talk about the tissue, not the name of the chamber. Right, so I think a lot of us made the mistake there, and you'll lose not just the name mark but also the function mark. Right, so I don't think this kind of question has ECF lah. Okay, so you might lose the both marks. So it's a cardiac muscle tissue, and then the function is to contract to pump blood out of the chamber of the heart, and then relaxes. relaxes the chambers of the heart to fill up with blood. Okay, so here we are talking about the heart, cardiac muscle. Oh, and also some of us wrote heart muscle tissue. It's not wrong to say that, but the proper medical term will be the cardiac muscle tissue. Okay, so let's use the proper terms. Okay, this question a little bit disappointing. I think some of us really find it difficult to read this kind of, especially a double y-axis graph. Okay, so over here we need to analyze this graph. On the left hand side, we see heart rates / beats per minute, and then that is represented by this white circle. Okay, and then on the right side, it says volume of blood pumped out of the left ventricle per dm per minute. That is represented by the black dots. So don't get confused. I think some of you got a little bit confused and start reading from the wrong side, the wrong y-axis. Okay, so the question says, state the volume of blood pumped out from the left ventricle at the start of the exercise. So you're supposed to look at the volume of blood in the black dots, right? I don't just see, oh, it's near to what, this is like 70 or whatever. That's not correct, all right? You actually need to look at the right side, right? You look at the right side. So at the start of exercise, which is over here, right, is all the way zoom to is right over here. Okay, so I just put a small little dot there. It's a bit hard for me. Okay, anyway, over there lah. And so the answer will be 5.6. Okay, not 78 or whatever this number is over here. I think some of you saw wrongly. Okay, next, determine how long it took for the heart rate to return to its resting rate after exercise had finished. Okay, so exercise had finished. We need to find the time where exercise has finished, which is 7 minutes. Right, so exercise finished at 7 minutes. And then how long did it take for the heart rate, the white dot, to return back to the original point, which is this point, right? So it ended at 9, or it returned back at 19 minutes. So take 19 minus 7, you get 12 minutes. Okay, I think again some of you you incorrectly subtract from 2 minutes, which is the start of the exercise, not the we're actually looking at the end of the exercise, 7 minutes. Okay, calculate the percentage increase in heart rate that occurs between 2 and 5 minutes. Give answer the whole nearest whole number, show it working. So again, this is not difficult if you know how to read the graph, but I think a lot of us find it hard to do the percentage increase. Okay, percentage increase is nothing difficult. All you need to do is to subtract, right, the final number from the initial number. So here we take 168, which is the final number over here, right, at 7 minutes, and then subtract from at 5 minutes. I look at this number over here, okay, and then subtract from 66, which is our original resting heart rate. Okay, so then we get 102 beats per minute, right? So how to find the percentage increase is that we need to take this new number divide by the original number, which was 66, times 100%. So it's just like asking how tall, what's the percentage change in your height when you were in primary school to secondary school. So if let's say in primary school you were 100 cm, right, and then in secondary school you're 150 cm, so you just take 150 divided by 100, right? That means you grew by, how much, I also don't know, right, 50% or something like that. Okay, so anyway, here we have the number as 155%, round off to the whole nearest whole number. I think some of us maybe you're using your 10-year series book, right, and then they gave the wrong number. This basically the 10-year series answer key was wrong lah, right? So it's not 68, it should be 66. Okay, next, describe the changes in heart rate during exercise. Okay, and so keyword is just during exercise. A lot of us wrote, before exercise, after exercise, not needed at all. Okay, so during exercise, from 2 to 4 minutes, the heart rate increased sharply and rapidly from 66 to 140 beats per minute. Then I bracket BPM. So once I bracket it, then I can use it as an acronym already. Okay, which is a gain of 74 BPM. So for me, I like to use 2 words. I use increase on the first word and then gain on the second time. I find it a bit of a mouthful to say increase and increase. It sounds a bit weird. Then from 4 to 6 minutes, the heart rate increased gradually from 160 to 170 BPM, a gain of 10 BPM. from 6 to 7 minutes, the heart rate remain constant at 170 ppm. So for this kind of question, I realize that a lot of us have difficulty in answering it. How to answer this kind of question? And you start by looking at the marks, right? You see that it's 3 marks. And so you need to think of how can you possibly divide your graph from here to the end, right, into 3 sections. So what I would do is that I would say, okay, if I see here there's a very steep increase, so maybe I'll say this is the first thing I'll talk about, right? The first from here to here, first thing. Then I see a gradual increase from here to here. Okay, that's the second thing that I talk about. And then I see there's a constant area, so it's the third thing that I talk about. So those are the 3 marks that I try to target. So don't just simply go like, oh, this is the start, this is the end. Then confirm only get 1 mark, right? You need to think of how can you maximize your marks here. Okay, question 4. Here we have a quite simple question. State the clotting time at 33. Unfortunately, some of us still have challenges with reading the graph. So simply use your ruler, right? Draw a line towards the side over here, right? And you can see that it's only 3 squares. Don't parallax error. So that's 3 minutes. Okay, use the data in figure 4 to describe the relationship between temperature and time. Okay, again, it saddens me to say this, but until today, some of us are still not using the data. Please, right, stop losing your marks like free like that. Okay, you don't want to donate it all away. So it's just simply just talking about the data here at the start, again, somewhere in the middle, and then somewhere at the end. So whenever you have a graph like this, always try to divide it into 3 sections: the starting, the middle, and the ending. Especially when you can see a sharper decrease, a gradual decrease, and the ending. So it goes like that, right? You can read it yourself. I don't want to repeat myself. Okay, so this question I'm going to skip because it's quite a basic function of blood clotting. Let's talk about question 5. So question 5 is identify and explain why the chambers of the heart have different wall of different thickness. So this is a data question. Although they never specify to use the data in this figure, but I think it's a good habit to still use some of the data that's provided. Okay, so chamber A and B are the left and right atria, as they have the lowest mean wall thickness of 3 mm. Okay, so both the atria have thinner walls as compared to both the ventricles. Okay, and some of you got a bit confused. You thought that this is your maybe your right side of the heart, the A and B is the right side of the heart. That's not true. It's not like that. Okay, so the ventricles are adjacent to the atria, so only thin walls are needed to generate a low atrial pressure in order to push blood from the atria into the ventricles. 1 mark. Chamber C is the right ventricle with a mean wall thickness of 5 mm. The right ventricle pumps blood to the lungs, which is a relatively short distance from the heart. Thus, the walls are only moderately thick to generate a lower pressure to prevent the damaging the pulmonary circulation. 1 mark. Chamber D is the left ventricle, as it has the highest mean wall thickness of 12 mm. The left ventricle has the thickest wall to pump blood under high pressure, as the blood needs to travel to the rest of the body, which is far away from the heart. 1 mark. Okay, so those are the 4 marks. Okay, some people are born with what we call as the ASD, right? The atrial septal defect. I think I talked about this in class also. So this also is in the notes, I believe, and yeah, I'm not going to talk too much about it. Okay, one possible cause of occlusion. The word occlusion simply means a blockage. Okay, last time they actually used the word arteriosclerosis, which is a pretty difficult word. A lot of students spell it wrongly, but I think they removed it in the recent syllabus. But it's okay, it's good to know this word, right? So what is arteriosclerosis is basically when the cholesterol, right, it forms that deposit in the lumen of the coronary arteries and it starts to harden, right? Then that causes this occlusion or blockage. So the 3 reasons, of course, is diet high in saturated fats and cholesterol. Please write the full sentence. Don't just write cholesterol, because that's not what causes it, but it's a diet that is high in saturated fats and cholesterol. All right, and smoking, and then high emotional stress. Again, don't be selfish with your words. Don't just write stress, because stress can mean many different things in different contexts. Okay, how the effects of occluding the coronary arteries. So basically, this is describing your coronary heart disease. I'm not going to talk too much about it. Right, these are all stuff that you can find in your textbook and in your notes. Question 7. Okay, so here we have this large artery. Why does the artery have a thick elastic layer? Because the artery pump transport blood from the heart to the rest of the body, which is under very high pressure. Hence, they require a thick elastic layer to withstand the high pressure without bursting. Keyword bursting. The elastic walls allow arteries to stretch under this high pressure and also recoil to push the blood through the arteries to the other parts of the body. Keyword stretch and recoil. Small arteries, okay, so we know that these are your arterioles, right? They have a larger proportion of muscle fibers than larger arteries. Suggests a role for the muscle fibers in the small arteries. So this one you haven't really learned yet. It's actually under the chapter on, I believe, excretion or homeostasis, I think. Yeah, maybe homeostasis, right? And so this is about what we call as vasoconstriction and vasodilation, where your arterioles can actually constrict, become smaller, or dilate, become bigger. So constriction increases the resistance to blood flow and hence increases blood pressure and reduces blood flow rate. Dilation causes a decrease in resistance and hence a decrease in blood pressure and an increase in blood flow rate. And this, okay, so what this is good is that actually it allows diversion of blood. For example, if you have somewhere that's bleeding or something, they actually will try to reduce the blood flow to that area. Okay, or if you have an area that is maybe your muscles need more blood, right, then you actually divert more blood towards your muscles. Another thing that it can do is that it can control your temperature of the body. So when it's a hot day, right, actually what happens is that near your skin, right, the arterioles near your skin, they will dilate, allow more blood to flow towards your skin, and then the heat in the blood can radiate out from the skin. Okay, this one don't need to talk about the presence of valves. Okay, so this is your vena cava as well as your right atrium. Do be careful, I think a few of you wrote left atrium, right? Remember, it's a mirror image on the paper. Okay, the role of the coronary arteries, this one we have mentioned before, so I'm going to skip through. Okay, describe the route taken by oxygen from the lungs to the kidneys. Name the blood vessels and the parts of the heart involved. So there's a high concentration of oxygen alveoli, so it dissolves into a thin film of moisture, diffuses past the alveolar wall, capillary wall into the pulmonary capillaries down a concentration gradient. Oxygen binds to hemoglobin of red blood cells to form oxyhemoglobin. Oxygenated blood then enters the left atrium via the pulmonary vein. The left atrium contracts, pressure increases, blood flows through the bicuspid valve into the left ventricle contracts, pressure increases, blood flows through the aortic semilunar valve to the aorta, then to the renal arteries, then to the renal arterioles, and finally the capillaries of the kidney. Okay, remember kidney is renal, right? Renal equals kidney. I think some of us, you accidentally wrote hepatic. Hepatic is for your liver, not your kidney. Okay, human body blood clot is one again, same story, right? Sometimes it's 2 marks, sometimes it's 3 marks. Doesn't matter, just repeat the same story, right? It doesn't hurt to write a little bit more. Okay, so explain how the structure of the red blood cell is related to the function of transport oxygen. Red blood cell contain hemoglobin, which bind reversibly to oxygen to form oxyhemoglobin, enable them to transport oxygen. Okay, just a quick point here. Some people wrote red blood cell transport oxygen. Not correct. Red blood cells, that one is primary school level. Red blood cells themselves carry the hemoglobin, which then transports the oxygen. So don't just simply write red blood cell transport oxygen. Then also write absence of nucleus allow them to carry more hemoglobin and thus increase oxygen carrying capacity. Okay, common mistake is to say, some common mistake is saying that the absence of nucleus allow it to carry more oxygen. That is not very correct. Okay, again, that's a primary school answer. Okay, then some people say that common mistake is to say that the red blood cell is a concave shape or convex shape. Also, I think some of you wrote biconvex shape. I think maybe it's too much physics. Okay, anyway, biconcave shape structure increase the surface area to volume ratio, keyword, and increase the rate of diffusion of oxygen in or out of the cell. Okay, so this one is oximeter. I think this question was not very well done. A lot of people didn't write very scientific answers. Okay, an oxygen saturation of 91 is below that of the healthy range. So this person has a lower percentage of hemoglobin attached to oxygen in the blood. This means that less oxygen is transported by the red blood cells from the lungs to the leg muscles, okay, because it's climbing the stairs, right? So leg muscle for aerobic respiration. Thus, there's insufficient amount of energy being produced to climb the stairs. The person may need to use anaerobic respiration in order to generate more energy, but lactic acid is produced as a result. Okay, so having too much lactic acid in the body is not good because it incur that oxygen debt. And then the person will get tired easily and have a higher breathing and heart rate when walking up the stairs. Okay, so which blood vessel has the highest oxygen saturation will be a pulmonary vein because it has just received all this oxygen blood directly from the lungs, and it has not passed through many cells yet, so it has a lot of high concentration of oxygen. Okay, these are basic questions. You should not be getting this wrong. Right, carbon dioxide is transported to the lungs for excretion during exhalation, and the white blood cells will circulate in the blood, provide defense against disease. Okay, question 10. Okay, I'm just thinking about this. Could it potentially be antibodies? Antibodies. Okay, I'm going to check on this because both of these answers might be correct. Okay, anyway, I'll move on first. I'll put my findings in the comment of this YouTube video. Okay, question 10. This one all basic stuff you should know. Okay, so what happens to Y and Z during the systole? Okay, now when they say systole, right, this is a bit funny lah. But if you talk to a doctor and you say systole of the cardiac cycle, he will automatically assume that you're talking about the ventricular systole. But when we say systole, it could potentially also mean atrial systole. Alright, so let's just be complete and write both atrial and ventricular systole. So during atrial systole, right atrium contracts, pressure increases, causing the tricuspid valve Z to force open, and blood will flow into the right ventricle wide. During ventricular systole, the right ventricle contracts, pressure increases, forces the tricuspid valve to shut, and prevent the backflow of blood, producing a lap sound. I think a lot of us forgot to write about this lap sound. Because you describe what happens, right? This lap sound is also what happens in the systole. The right ventricle continues to contract until pressure is very high, then the pulmonary valve are forced open and blood is pumped into the pulmonary artery X. Blood travels from Y to the capillaries of the kidney. Describe the route of the blood flow, making reference to the blood vessel and organs involved. Again, it's quite similar to the question that we have done above, so I won't talk too much about it. Okay, last part. So a patient with lung disease is inactive and consuming too much carbohydrate and fat. Okay, now for this kind of question, usually this is like why you have a double meaning question. So you need to be careful when you answer to talk about everything that's in this question, because there's two parts to answer. So some people might just home in on the fats, right? Then you just start talking about circulatory system, how it's going to cause that coronary heart disease, but they neglected about the part that's inactive and the lung disease, and they also neglected about the part talking about the health. So a high intake of carbohydrate and saturated fats promote the deposition of cholesterol and fat deposits in the coronary artery wall, which causes narrowing of the artery. The heart ability to pump blood is reduced due to lack of exercise, and the heart becomes weaker. Okay, so answer the question about the inactive. The patient already has lung disease. There's reduced delivery of oxygen in the blood to the heart. His health will suffer as he has difficulty performing strenuous tasks. You feel tired and fatigued easily. The narrowing of the lumen also results in an increase in blood pressure, causing the arteries to develop a rough lining that will increase the probability of blood clots. Narrow artery can cause heart attack due to the tissue of the heart receiving insufficient blood, hence oxygen and nutrient for aerobic respiration. If the coronary artery becomes completely blocked, the supply of glucose and oxygen is cut off, resulting in a heart attack. Okay, so 4 marks only, but you need to write quite a lot. This is what calls essay question, right? So don't be selfish with your word. Just write, basically write what you know. Okay. Okay, and with that, we come to the end of this 10-year series unit. Right, I'll try my best to try to produce some of these videos whenever possible for the other 10-year series, but I can't do it for every single chapter, right? It's quite a lot of work to do this. Anyway, see you back in school, and all the best. I hope you are revising your stuff at this point of time also. Right, see ya. Bye-bye.